Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How do you do? It's Jinzo here, and the pleasure is all mine. As suggested by the video title, today's topic will be on the history of Icefrog. However, I have to apologize in advance, as the video title may be a slight misnomer. I probably could have called this video on the history of Pendragon Part 2, but as you will soon come to find, the vast majority, if not the entirety of the video, is related to Icefrog, so I found this title more fitting. So with that in mind, I would wholeheartedly recommend that the viewer should watch my video on the history of Pendragon before proceeding to this one. With that out of the way, let us begin. So as most of us know by now, in April of 2004, Clan Team Dota All-Stars was formed, often simply referred to as Clan TDA for short. It consisted of Pendragon, Ginsu, Icefrog, and many others. Despite its humble beginnings, the lead developer of Dota All-Stars changed many times during its earlier years. Eventually, in mid-2005, Icefrog took over as the lead developer of Dota All-Stars. However, Nakus was the lead developer before Icefrog, and let's see what he had to say. After a few months of heading the project, I became really disenchanted with the whole thing. I mostly did this for fun in my spare time while in college, but it was frustrating to spend hours of work on fixing bugs or coming up with novel ideas only to be ripped on for something else. So I basically dropped the whole thing somewhat unfairly on Icefrog's lap and left. Been interesting to see how it's evolved over the years, and certainly best of luck to him in developing Dota with Valve. Now, if you're wondering how big Icefrog's impact was back then on the development of Dota All-Stars, Nakus has an answer. TBS Dota asks the question on Reddit: how did you get into the position with being the main editor of Dota All-Stars, and why was the code for the map after Ginsu left so buggy? To which Nakus replies, over time Ginsu became less involved in the project, although he still held the reins. Back in the day, the map was protected by some unofficial method. I don't recall exactly. It involved deleting something that prevented it from being opened in the editor, and he would share it occasionally. After a while, we were reaching a point where his inactivity was harming things, and I took it on myself to take the project from him. To this end, I convinced two key people to join me. Pendragon controlled the site, and he who controls the site controls the universe. I don't recall how I met Icefrog originally, but he had the ability to break the protection and get me access to the map. And Nakus' answer to the second question of why the map was so buggy: well, because it was all amateur work between me, Ginsu, and whoever else. Icefrog was the first guy who had any real training in programming, and he was far more dedicated to balance and bug fixing. So it sounds like even back then, Icefrog's role was rather important to the team to be able to create a Dota All-Stars version that was bug-free and enjoyable for the larger audience. But what sort of individual is Icefrog? We already know that he meticulously tweaks Dota for balance and bug fixes. What about his personality? What kind of person is he? Well, for the remainder of this video, I will endeavour to present some facts about Icefrog's past, and you as the viewer can decide for yourself. As expected though, Icefrog hasn't exactly made this easy for us. As we know, he is a very reserved individual. He conveys his mannerisms online in a very concise manner, and maintains his pseudonymity, even today. With that in mind, we shall attempt to stay true to the motive of this video. I would like to kindly remind the viewers that we are not here to speculate on who Icefrog may or may not be. And just to demonstrate how elusive Icefrog is, let's turn back to the Dota 2 Reddit. There have been a lot of AMA requests for Icefrog. We'll just have a look at a few of the popular ones. Pale Dolphin asks, I bet the community has over 9,000 a lot of questions for him, so maybe it's about time for him to do an AMA. To which 9Black replies with, I have the solution, mates. Someone make a thread in which we pretend to be asking Icefrog questions. Upvote relevant stuff, downvote stupid things. If we get it to the front page, then Valve sees it and we just might get answers. Asking him for an AMA never works, so if we get to the top 20 questions, we can just hope he answers those. And this one is my favourite of all time. So Reddit user Goblin Techies innocently requests 5 very reasonable questions for Icefrog to answer, to which the top comment is, the chance of this happening is below 0. Unsurprisingly, there have been countless AMA requests for Icefrog over the years, and unfortunately none have been answered. All is not lost, however, as we go back to his Q&A sessions on the Play Dota website. And during this period, as I read out some of Icefrog's responses, try to create a persona of Icefrog in your mind, because after investigating the Q&A sessions with Icefrog, we're going to use this persona we've created to see whether or not Pendragon's and Trendemir's accusations on Icefrog are accurate. In December 2008 Q&A session 1 with Icefrog, DotaLeague.com asks the question, "You published your email address in the Dota loading screen. How many emails do you get there every day, and what is the craziest email you have ever received?" To which Icefrog replies, "Quite a lot of emails come through, but it varies a lot from day to day. Yesterday was many hundreds. I do my best to read and reply to as many of them as I can. I feel that if a user takes the time out to write an email to let me know his thoughts, I should try to do the same. It also helps me understand some of the concerns players have or things they would like to see. There are some funny emails for sure, but I'm not sure it is appropriate to share private messages." Anonymous question 2 from Q&A session 2 in early 2009. "Do you gain money from making Dota updates or advertisements?" "No, I do not. I get asked this question quite frequently. Some people tend to assume that because many of the Dota community sites have advertisements, that I get a portion of it, but I am not involved at all with advertisements whatsoever, as you can see from getdota.com and my blog." And the final question we'll be having a look at in the Q&A session is from 2010. Sodos asks the question, "Can you tell us how you first met Valve and how you like it there so far?" It started off with an email from Valve where they mentioned that they were big fans of Dota and wanted to fly me out to spend some time with them and visit their studio. I wasn't quite sure what to expect from the trip. After arriving and chatting with them, the first thing I noticed was how much of their decision-making process was like mine. They shared the same aspirations towards building a long-term and sustainable community without having short-sighted business goals that end up hurting the quality of the game. One of the most important things for me though was that there wasn't going to be anyone standing above telling me how I should be doing things. They trust the developers that have experience to make the best decisions for their player base. The atmosphere at Valve allows everyone to be comfortable and able to focus on what they love doing. It also doesn't hurt that they are huge Dota fans until their favourite heroes are nerfed, then I'm the bad guy for a week. So Icefrog answered these questions very directly. They seem to be very straightforward answers, he hasn't avoided them in any way. This is very important as we go on to the next part of the story. Icefrog diligently works on the improvement of Dota All-Stars as the lead developer all the way up until around 2009. It was around this time, as described in my video on the history of Pendragon, that the Dota All-Stars website was shut down indefinitely. Pendragon writes a letter addressing the entire Dota All-Stars community, and within the letter he attacks Icefrog directly. I quote, "While I originally intended to leave this out of the letter, in light of the fact that this information is now out in the open, I think it's important to set the record straight. Many believe that Icefrog left because I wanted to commercialize, and he did not. In reality, I had learned that Icefrog had been secretly working for S2 Games after conducting a series of meetings where he was attempting to sell a full Dota game concept to a number of companies, including Riot. The differences of opinion that we had were merely that I chose to be transparent and honest about the project that I was working on, and the direction my career was going. After working on and launching League, I began to realize that in addition to having no free time anymore, with League available to play, I no longer possessed the passion for Dota, which once drove me. And with this in mind, there are still a small number of players who criticize Icefrog even today for allegedly working with S2 Games. In view of this, to demonstrate this example, so just to look at this post, it is of no particular significance, except that many people still seem to hold this view about Icefrog, and it's the following. Because Icefrog attempted to sell a full Dota concept to various gaming companies, he is as guilty as Pendragon. Why is Pendragon criticized and not Icefrog for doing the exact same thing? This argument runs very deep, as it's what Pendragon has been insinuating over all these years. Icefrog has been very dishonest and has been working on Heroes of Newerth behind the entire Dota All-Stars community's back. Meanwhile, Pendragon was completely honest and transparent. He just decided to move on to a different project, which is League of Legends, that he is more interested in. So why is everybody blaming him? Let me explain. First of all, I don't think anyone would really contend the view that the reason why Pendragon moved on from Dota All-Stars to League of Legends is because of the difference in the money involved. League of Legends, especially during the shutdown of the Dota All-Stars website at the time in 2009, had a lot of money invested into the game, and Pendragon was being paid substantially more by Riot than he would be by continuing to work for Dota All-Stars. And as he left, he didn't just leave quietly, he shut down the Dota All-Stars website, stole ideas from it, plagiarized, copyrighted the Dota All-Stars website trademark that didn't really belong to him, and many other offences which are described in more detail in my other video on the history of Pendragon. Let's see what one of the founders of Riot, and consequently League of Legends, has to say about this. I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, Trundamere. Referring to Pendragon, of course he is. He is our Director of Player Experience and is the most player-focused, passionate community leader I've ever met in my entire life, and we search far and wide for these people. Pendragon built Riot's initial teams, etc. He is a humble advocate who helps spread Riot's mission of being the most player-focused game company in the world, and he believes in this mission with all of his being. It is literally who he is, and this has never changed. It is the same passion that led him to spearhead and lead the creator of the Dota All-Stars community. Pendragon created the community momentum when he partnered with GINZO to build a website to support the game. He built and managed an army of volunteers to help snowball Dota into what it is today, and he personally drove the mission of for players by players. He has never wavered in this belief, which is why it is such a tragic modern story. He is not the one to blame for the fragmenting of the community. He merely took the fall because he is strong enough to handle it and believed that by allowing himself to take the fall, he would actually save the community. I am not lying to you. He is the Dark Knight of Dota. So with that in mind, let us turn our attention back to Icefrog. The allegation that Icefrog did in fact work with S2 Games on Heroes of Newerth is a rumour, but let's assume for the sake of argument that it did happen and Pendragon and Trundamere are correct on this matter. Let's also assume for the sake of argument that Icefrog went to many other game developers and pitched, quote, the Dota concept to them, as Pendragon suggested. Keeping in mind that we know Icefrog did not make any money from the development of Dota All-Stars, even if Icefrog did in fact pitch the Dota concept to many game developers as Pendragon suggested, would it really be called, quote, selling out? We know that at the time Icefrog was only interested in creating a carbon copy of Dota All-Stars, which would have to be the effective, direct successor of the game, and he wouldn't be settling for anything less. If Icefrog was to sell out, he would have joined Riot in the same way that Pendragon did. There is no way that S2 at the time could have offered as much money as Riot could have. In addition, if we assume that S2 promised Icefrog that Heroes of Newerth would be a direct successor to Dota All-Stars, it would have been fine, except it wasn't. And because it wasn't a carbon clone of Dota All-Stars and didn't represent the true essence of the game, Icefrog simply left S2 because it wasn't the game that he wanted to create. In addition, the development of Dota All-Stars during this period was not hindered at all. Icefrog continued to work diligently on the game, constantly updating the map, as he usually does. So with that in mind, the viewer can decide for themselves whether or not Icefrog is guilty of being deceitful, as both Pendragon and Trundamere have repeatedly insinuated over the past 7 years. But as we know, eventually Icefrog was hired by Valve and he was allowed to develop the game that he always wanted to do, a true successor to Dota All-Stars that overcame the limitations of the Warcraft 3 engine. And if you're still wondering why Icefrog is now even more anonymous than he used to be, there is a popular opinion that the reason why Icefrog never communicates with his English fans is because, well, it's explained very well here by Fan Feta. Some years ago, he posted pictures of his new cat in Play Dota, asking people to name it for him. 1% were thinking of Dota names for his cat, 99% were bashing him in the forums for posting cat pictures instead of working on more Dota versions. That was the last time Icefrog shared something personal with the Western audience as far as I know. So nowadays, unfortunately, Icefrog only communicates with his Chinese audience on a regular basis. If you go on his Weibo, the Chinese equivalent of Twitter, he has almost 900,000 followers there. And I suppose if you really want to contact him, 大家都可以好好学一下中文，然后上微博给冰蛙留言。That's roughly translated to, I suppose everyone can just learn Chinese and leave him a message on that website. Sorry, I know that wasn't useful at all. But nevertheless, that still comes to the end of this video. Just throw a like if you enjoyed this video, that's all I ask from you guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me them on Twitter at TZJinZo. And of course, as always, we have the Discord chat, which is pretty fun, so feel free to pop by for a chat. And thank you very much for watching, guys. Until next time, hopefully the next episode will be interesting to watch as well. Jinzo out.